Ukraine and Russia have begun another round of talks. Ukraine Foreign Minister Dymtro Kuleba and Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov are holding talks in Turkey. The talks have begun just a short while ago. And another development, Ukraine has accused Russia of war crimes over the devastating attack on a children's hospital in Mariupol. There are reports of many dead and injured, with disturbing reports of children buried in the debris. Meanwhile, over 1,200 people have been killed in 9 days as Russia continues its siege of Mariupol. Times Network's Jonathan is tracking all the updates for us. Jonathan, right now the focus, of course, is on the talks that are happening between the foreign ministers of two countries in Turkey. But on ground in Ukraine, what can you tell us? We are showing our viewers visuals from Mariupol, and it's extremely disturbing to see that this children's hospital that was attacked, and I believe there are a lot of fatalities, mostly children.
Yes, these pictures coming out of Mariupol are beyond comprehension, aren't they, really? I mean, it's difficult, really difficult to understand how and why this happened. Even Russia, depraved and callous as they've proven themselves to be until now, have stopped short so far of bombing a women's maternity hospital, supposedly full of children and pregnant women. It's almost like a nightmare that they couldn't have written themselves. They, of course, naturally are claiming that Ukrainian military positions were hidden within the hospital itself. This is just classic psyops, classic misinformation. This happens in all wars. But I suppose the big question in my mind is why? What's the purpose of this? There's no strategic reason for this. It has no strategic advantage. It's obviously turning world opinion even further against Russia, if that were conceivably possible. One can only imagine it's just the result of what has been utterly indiscriminate shelling against this poor city of Mariupol. You can see those pictures there. They're reducing this city to rubble, literally in front of our eyes. And when they're finished, there may be nothing left, not just hospitals, but literally not a building left standing.
Which means, Jonathan, that some cities, like you said, are reduced to rubble. Certain other locations where the Ukrainian forces are putting up a tough fight. What can you tell us of the latest that's happening on ground in other cities as well?
Well, look, there are a huge number of front lines now. This is quite a hybrid war. Many different points of contact. I think Mariupol is probably the most bloody as we speak. But obviously, Kharkiv continues to undergo shelling. There is, incidentally, as you pointed out, a ceasefire today, which ought to give some of these citizens a little bit of a respite, perhaps an opportunity to try and escape, or at least find somewhere safer to live. But Kiev also has been subject to sporadic bombardment over the last few days. The big worry is that Russia may be using these lulls in the fighting to simply restock, resupply, and reassemble their forces. There's still, this seems incredible from a military strategic perspective, but there's still this 40-kilometer odd convoy of heavy armor, tanks, APCs, rocket launchers, artillery pieces, etc., stalled outside of Kiev. It can only have been held up by disablement of certain units. But if that arrives in Kiev as intended, then all bets are off. Kiev itself will undergo this reductio to rubble.
Yes, but, you know, then what you're saying here, Jonathan, is a sinister plan then, because what you're telling us is that the ceasefire might actually be a smokescreen. It is using that window to restock weapons. Now, is there a pattern that you see there? Is there a reason you say that? Because clearly there is no sign of any let-up in the kind of offensive that Russia is mounting.
Yeah, look, no one's pretending that war is a nice thing. Okay, when you go to war, you use every single resource at your disposal: military, technological, propaganda, information. And of course, if you get a 24-hour window, you're going to use that to try and maximize your advantage. There's no question about that whatsoever. I think the big problem now, as we enter week 3 of this conflict, it's become perfectly clear that Russia has made a series of absolutely catastrophic miscalculations. They thought this would be a blitzkrieg, a lightning war, as they achieved in Crimea, that they would roll into Ukraine without resistance and have the whole thing over by now. This clearly hasn't happened as a result of stiff and spirited resistance from the Ukrainians and a series of very poor military decisions on the Russian part. But they're not going to back down. They don't, they haven't, and they never will. So what they will inevitably do now is pivot to their default mode, which is just bombing the hell out of everything they see. They did it in Aleppo in Syria 5 years ago. They did it in Chechnya, Grozny, 25 years ago, 20 years ago. And look at these pictures. They're doing it again. This is what Russia does. This is what Russians do. If they can't invade you, they will flatten you.